Welcome to the Speak Up English channel. Are you ready to embark on an exciting journey of language learning? At Speak Up, we're passionate about helping you improve your English listening skills. Our lessons are packed with engaging content, including short talks, conversations, reports, news, and captivating short stories. So, grab your headphones, sit back, and let's dive into the world of English together. Remember, every word you listen to brings you one step closer to fluency. Let's make this learning adventure fun and rewarding. Subscribe now and join our community at the Speak Up English channel. Let's learn, laugh, and grow together. Subscribe to Speak Up.
Museums. A different sort of art heist. Museums are raising their ticket prices. How high can they go?
It's almost a moral duty that museums should be free, said Glenn Lowry, director of the Museum of Modern Art, or MoMA. That was in 2002, when a ticket to MoMA cost $12, around $19 in today's prices. In October, MoMA started charging $30, the latest in a series of price rises. MoMA is not the only museum raising the cost of admission. The Metropolitan Museum in New York ended its long-standing pay-what-you-will policy for out-of-town visitors in 2018, and raised general admission for them to $30 in 2022. Last summer, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum, and the Guggenheim Museum all followed suit, bumping a standard ticket from $25 to $30. Museum staff complain of climbing costs and a case of long COVID. In America, only a third of museums have met or surpassed pre-pandemic visitor numbers. Higher energy and labour costs have pushed up ticket prices in Europe too. In January, the Berlin State Museums, the Louvre and the Vatican Museums, which include the Sistine Chapel, raised the price of general admission tickets by 20%, 29% and 17%, respectively. Prices have remained stable only in Asia and the Middle East, where museums are younger and state funding is especially generous. Ticket fees may seem high, particularly in destination cities where tourists are not likely to be dissuaded by spending a few more dollars. But whatever museums charge is not covering their operating costs, says Javier Jimenez, a director at Lord Cultural Resources, a consulting firm. The Association of Art Museum Directors reported in 2018 that ticket sales accounted, on average, for just 7% of total revenue at American art museums. Memberships contributed another 7%. The remainder of budgets usually come from endowments, charitable donations, grants, and retail operations. European museums are less reliant on admission fees because they are often heavily subsidised by governments. This can make it awkward to ask taxpayers to buy a pricey ticket and, in effect, pay twice. Many institutions choose to offer reductions for the young, pensioners and locals. All national institutions in Britain offer free admission, as do most state-run museums in China. Exceptions are made for special exhibitions. In America, some 30% are free, including big public museums like those of the Smithsonian Institution and private ones such as the Getty Center in Los Angeles. Some observers have repeated Mr. Lowry's call for museums, especially the well-endowed, to stop charging for admission entirely. Ballooning prices go against museums' goal of sharing art with a more diverse public. They could also accelerate the already steep decline in the share of Americans attending museums and galleries. Between 2017 and 2022, it shrunk by 26%. Declining public interest, particularly among young people, is a challenge for institutions that rely heavily on public support. Those who choose not to visit a museum today Maybe the people who vote against government subsidies or refuse to write personal cheques as patrons in a few years. Those who spend time inside museum galleries are more likely to grasp their richness and want to invest their own riches in them. Yet, significantly reducing costs may not actually do much to attract new audiences either. In both America and Europe, people say that price is just one of several factors when it comes to deciding what to do with their leisure time. If tickets were free, people who typically come anyway might come more often. Otherwise, you're not really changing your demographic, says Michael Rushton, an economist at Indiana University who studies pricing in the arts. He compares museums to elite American universities. Harvard and Stanford could afford to make tuition free for all, but many wealthy students who do not need the gift would be among the biggest beneficiaries. As museums throughout the West debate what price is right, most are unlikely to conclude the answer is zero, moral duty or not.
Listen carefully. You will hear a talk about scientific research in the continent of Antarctica.
Tonight I'm going to talk to you about that remarkable continent, Antarctica. Remote, hostile, and at present uninhabited on a permanent basis. For early explorers, it was the ultimate survival contest. For researchers like me, it remains a place of great intellectual challenge, while for the modern tourist, it's simply a wilderness of great beauty. First, some facts and figures. Antarctica is a place of extremes, the highest, coldest, and windiest continent, and over 58 times the size of the UK. The ice cap contains almost 70% of the world's fresh water and 90% of its ice. But with very low snowfall, most of the continent technically falls unbelievably into the category of desert. Huge icebergs break off the continent each year, while in winter, half the surrounding ocean freezes over, which means its size almost doubles. Research and exploration has been going on in Antarctica for more than 200 years and has involved scientists from many different countries who work together on research stations. Here, science and technical support have been integrated in a very cost-effective way. Our Antarctic research program has several summers-only stations and 2 all-year-round ones. I was based on one of the all-year-round ones. The research stations are really self-contained communities of about 20 people. There's living and working space, a kitchen with a huge food store, a small hospital, and a well-equipped gym to ensure everyone keeps fit in their spare time. The station generates its own electricity and communicates with the outside world using a satellite link. Our station, 01, had some special features. It wasn't built on land, but on an ice shelf, hundreds of meters thick. Supplies were brought to us on large sledges from a ship 15 kilometers away at the ice edge. Living in the Antarctic hasn't always been so comfortable. Snow buildups caused enormous problems for 4 previous stations on the same site, which were buried and finally crushed by the weight. Fortunately, no one was hurt, but these buildings became a huge challenge to architects, who finally came up with a remarkable solution. The buildings are placed on platforms, which can be raised above the changing snow level on legs which are extendable. Food is one of the most important aspects of survival in a polar climate. People living there need to obtain a lot more energy from their food, both to keep warm and to undertake heavy physical work. Maybe you know that an adult in the UK will probably need about 1,700 kilocalories a day on average. Someone in Antarctica will need about 3,500, just over double. This energy is provided by foods which are high in carbohydrate and fat. Rations for fieldwork present an additional problem. They need to provide maximum energy, but they must also be compact and light for easy transport. Special boxes are prepared, each containing enough food for one person for 20 days. You may be familiar with coffee processed by freeze-drying, which preserves the quality of the food product while making a large saving in weight. Well, this type of presentation is ideal in our situation. It wasn't available to earlier polar explorers whose diet was commonly insufficient for their health. I think that being at the cutting edge of science has a special appeal for everyone working in Antarctica, in whatever capacity. As a marine biologist, my own research was fascinating, but it's perhaps climate change research that is the most crucial field of study. Within this general field, surveying changes in the volume and stability of the ice cap is vital, since these may have profound effects on world sea levels and on ocean currents. A second important area is monitoring the size of the hole in the ozone layer above Antarctica, since this is an indicator of global ultraviolet radiation levels. Thirdly, bubbles in the ice sheet itself provide an index of pollution, because frozen inside them are samples of previous atmospheres over the past 500,000 years, and these provide us with evidence for the effects of such human activities as agriculture and industry. There are an increasing number of opportunities for young people to work for a period in Antarctica, not only as research assistants in projects like mine, but also in a wide range of junior administrative and technical positions, including vacancies for map makers. I hope that the insights I've provided will encourage you to take up these opportunities in this fascinating continent.
Listen carefully.
In the studio tonight, we have the daughter of those well-known Hollywood stars, Stephen and Freya Updike. Liliana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. It's nice to be here.
Liliana, let me start by asking you about your childhood. What was it like being the child of two such famous actors? It must have been very glamorous.
Well, no, not really. All that glamour doesn't really interest you as a child. Besides, remember that I grew up in England and spent very little time with my parents.
So, who was the greatest influence on you when you were growing up?
Definitely my grandmother. She was the one who took care of me. She did everything for me. It was my grandmother who used to cook for me every day. She was an excellent cook, and I used to love her food.
Yeah. What else do you remember?
I remember that she used to take me shopping for clothes. I enjoyed that because she would let me try everything on. Also, when I was about 8, I remember being ill for a long time, and it was my grandmother who nursed me during that time.
She sounds like a very special woman.
Oh, she was. She made me feel safe when I was feeling insecure. She was the one thing in my life that never changed. And of course, she loved me as if I was her own daughter. She was always there when I needed her.
Did you feel bitter towards your parents?
Not really. Again, because I was so young, I didn't know anything different. At school, all the other kids talked about their parents, and I used to talk about my grandmother in the same way.
What do you think your grandmother taught you?
Oh, lots of things. Everything, in fact. She taught me about life, but she taught me in a very special way, probably because she was so much older. She always explained things to me. She would never tell me to do things without giving an explanation of why I should do them.
And what do you think is the most important thing she taught you?
The difference between right and wrong. This is very important for everyone, and I was lucky enough to have someone who was experienced and who loved me, who could teach me values which will last me for a lifetime.
Liliana, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
Listen carefully.
And now to California, the really, really free market.
takes place on the last Saturday of every month in Dolores Park, in the beautiful Californian city of San Francisco. Know Global. What is a really, really free market? It's a community event where everyone brings something to give away and expects nothing in return. People bring CDs, books, old clothes, pieces of furniture. Other people bring food and drink, while others offer a free massage, a haircut, or a musical performance. The important factor here is that money isn't welcome, and there's no bartering. Everything is 100% free. The market takes place on the last Saturday of every month, an occasion for people to forget the stress of modern life and to rediscover the value of community. The really, really free market RRFM movement didn't originate in San Francisco. Political activists in Florida and North Carolina organized the first markets as part of a protest against globalization and the FTAA, Free Trade Area of the Americas. The neighborhood. Dolores Park was once predominantly working class. Nearby, in Valencia Street, is the Levi Strauss factory, which produced jeans for over 90 years. It closed in 2002, and today functions as a museum where you can buy authentic reproductions of vintage Levi's.
Listen carefully.
Anna Meller. Upcycle your job. The Smart Way to Balance Family Life and Career. Narrated by Morag Sims and Ariane Stanley.
If you're a working mother, then you're familiar with impossible decisions. You can choose to focus on your career, but that'll mean less time with your child. Or you can put family first, but we all know the consequences of that choice. Reduced pay and, quite possibly, a career plateau. Faced with such a decision, some women attempted to discard their careers entirely. But what if there was a better choice? What if you could upcycle your career instead? To upcycle is to renew and revitalize. And that's precisely what these blinks will help you do with your career. By introducing you to the Propel model, they'll empower you to establish a better work-life balance and help you create a professional career that's tailored to your personal life. These days, there's no easy escape from work. If you're listening to this, then you have access to a smartphone or a computer. And that means you're available. What's more, your employer knows that you're available. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you can be called, emailed, or pinged. It's an understatement to say the line between professional life and personal life has been blurred. For many workers, it's been erased entirely. In this environment, the ideal worker thrives. Usually men, these workers have the flexibility to prioritize their job above all else. But what about the rest of us? What about the people, especially mothers, who certainly care about work but have other priorities too?
The key message here is, it's up to you to manage your work-life balance.
Corporate culture makes life especially difficult for women. For starters, most women actually work 2 jobs, the 9-to-5 for which they get paid, and a hidden second shift, all the unpaid housework that typically falls to them. For working mothers, it's even more difficult. They often have to choose between professional ambition and parental obligation. Faced with such a choice, it's tempting to heave a mighty sigh and take a career break, which usually means a cut in lifetime earnings. So what about working part-time? Well, for many women, part-time ends up being the same workload crammed into fewer hours. A UK study done by Professor Claire Kelleher and Dr. Deirdre Anderson found that employees who opted for flexible hours actually experienced higher workloads. And while companies may be eager to implement work-life flexibility, there's often insufficient guidance on how to do one's work in less time. Luckily, the traditional corporate paradigm is shifting. Employers are finally starting to admit that the old ways don't work so well. But that doesn't mean they'll figure out your needs for you. To take advantage of this shift, you'll need clarity about what you want to achieve, commitment to your vision, and courage to ask for what you need. Expect to feel vulnerable as you step outside your comfort zone. But remember, by asking for the professional resources you need, you're acting as a role model for generations of women to come. There's no simple formula for the ideal work-life balance. Everyone is different, and a solution that works for you may not work for someone else. You may want to separate your work life from your home life completely, or you may be willing to integrate the two. Sometimes working from the office, sometimes working from home. Figuring out how you want to approach work will require a deep investigation of your values and desires. But it'll be worth it, because you can only upcycle your job once you have a clear understanding of your preferences, which is the first step of the Propel model.
The key message here is, your first step to upcycling your job is to have a clear understanding of your work-life preferences.
If you prefer to separate work and family, consider which takes priority. You may find that becoming a mother has shifted your priorities, and taking this shift into account may require adjustments to your life. If you prefer to integrate, you should establish boundaries between work and family. Don't let office emails interrupt dinner, and don't let your children distract you from client calls. Usually, though, it's the spillover from work that negatively affects our home life, not the other way around. Research indicates that it can lead to marital strife and psychological stress. So what is a good way to manage this boundary? One way is to find boundary corridors to get out of work mode. After leaving the office, take some time to exercise, call a friend, or prepare dinner. Remember, this isn't time slacking off, but rather an essential and restorative transition. Last, we have to address the elephant in our pockets, our mobile devices. With these little machines going off all day long, most people find it difficult to disengage from work, and this kind of constant engagement contributes to a state of permanent stress. One way to deal with this mini elephant is to set up micro boundaries. For instance, try separating your personal and work emails, or turn off your notifications at certain times. Researchers at Carnegie Mellon University found that turning off notifications for even a day led to less distraction and greater productivity. So where do you think the ideal work-life balance lies for you? And how well are you managing your boundaries? Whatever you decide, what's most important is that you've chosen your own path rather than resentfully giving in to the demands placed upon you. Ultimately, the ideal balance is struck when your personal growth is supported by both your work and your non-work activities.